as the university that is pushing and endorsing sustainability agenda, we believe that discussion that is focusing on complexity and sustainability is very much needed to increase our understanding about the complex issues of sustainability. And today we are very honored to have Professor Keishiro Hara with us. Allow me to read, I will read a little bit of his CV later before his presentation. So allow me to read the agenda for today. So we will start a welcome remark from Ibu Eva Anggraini, and then there will be a 1-hour presentation, and then followed up with a discussion, and we will close at 12 o'clock exactly. So without further ado, I would like to give the platform to the Director of Global Connectivity, Dr. Eva Anggraini.
Thank you, Prof. Dami, for facilitating this guest lecture or webinar. Good morning, everybody. First of all, I would like to convey my, my great appreciation for our honorable speaker, Professor Ohara. Thank you for your willingness to share today's into this guest lecture, and we think this is a very precious time for us to get knowledge from you, especially with the topics which is very interesting and very outward-looking topics. And I also would like to thank to Prof. Anas, the Dean of the Graduate School, for attending this webinar. It is we really greatly appreciate it, and also for all the students here and our team at the Global Connectivity Directorate for organizing the activity. So yeah, this is a really interesting topic, particularly for IPB, since we have been dealing with or developing concept on digitalizations under the framework of Agro-Maritime 4.0, where we really try to embed our capitals, like human capitals, ecological capitals, technological capitals, and how we optimize this into a sustainable way of using nature, using the environment and resource and environment. So this is somehow the strong relation within the topic of Prof. Hara will deliver today with what we have been developing within the last 5 years in IPB. And I think Japan, we know that has what we call promote the concept of society 4.0. So I think this is a very interesting how technological or digital technology in order to promote, to enhance our to maintain the sustainability, and then for the future. And we would like such kind of concept embedded or integrated at the human behavior. And this, of course, reflects by the preference of the people, of the consumer. And the theme that incorporating the preference of future generations into the present, this is very challenging. It is really, really challenging that we try to see what will happen in the future, but we try to anticipate it today, so that we are ready for the changes that that may occur either predictably or unpredictably. So something like that. So I think this is a very interesting topics, and this is very transdisciplinary, and where Prof. Dami, she is the head of the research center for the transdisciplinary CTSS Center for Transdisciplinary and Sustainable Science, where Prof. Dami also has developed some ideas, a concept on under the center research center. So I think it will enrich our knowledge on the topic, and I hope that all the participants can get insight and inspirations on how this can be implemented or developed, and of course somehow how it can also let's say influence the education itself. Yeah, I think this is some remarks that from my side, and yeah, we would like to continue with the discussions, with the presentation and discussion later on. And thank you again for all the participants, and I hope you enjoy. Thank you.
Thank you.
Dami, thank you.
Thank you so much, Ibu Eva. Okay, so ladies and gentlemen, dear participants, we have heard from Ibu Eva in her opening remarks how it is very important for us to also, when we talk about sustainability, it's not only our generation, but it's also the future generation. So this is, again, for IPB, maybe this is also something that we haven't really thought of, even though maybe we do think about it, but it was still uncovered. So today's discussion will be very interesting because we will hear from Professor Farah how sustainability should be thinking about the future generation. So with his, the title of his presentation is Incorporating the Preferences of Future Generations into the Present. So we are all excited about this wonderful talk, and let me read a little bit about his background. So Professor Hara, Keishiro Hara, he is a co-director of the Center for Future Innovation from the Graduate School of Engineering, Osaka University. And he is also director of the Hara Research Base for Future Design in the Center of Excellence in Advanced Research from Techno area in Osaka University. Okay, there, we can read this together. And you have, if you are interested to contact him, there is his email over there. And he is also active and well, there's a policy position. I'm not quite sure what policy position actually means, but he's, oh, okay. He's actually a senior officer for the technology policy and strategy with the government of Japan. This is wonderful. And Professor Hara has several adjunct positions in different years. In the past, he has been working with REETI and then also senior fellow at the Tokyo Foundation. And he has received numerous awards and many, many publications that is in front of me. Very, very impressive indeed. So without further ado, let us all listen to the 1 hour talk from Professor Hara. The time is yours.
Thank you very much. Very nice to meet all of you. And thank you very much for the warm welcome and also the introduction to myself, to professors. And also for inviting me to this very interesting seminar. I was very surprised to see this is a 93rd seminar. So it's I have insights from this field and from the interdisciplinary studies. And today, I would like to discuss with you the future design, but the most important thing is that how we can incorporate the preferences of future generations into the present decision making or behavior. That's, I believe, is very important for to pursue sustainability. The reason I will explain in my presentation. And also, just let me introduce myself a little bit. I'm an environmental engineer by training, but the graduate school, I try to incorporate the different perspectives of environmental studies or social sciences with complex issues of sustainability, which is obviously interdisciplinary, requires interdisciplinary approach. And and after joining Osaka University, I had an opportunity to be transferred to the government, Ministry of Economy, Trade and Industry, as an officer. So I was for a short time period I was kind of the government officer. In that period, I've been working on technology policy and strategy in manufacturing industry bureau, and but I tried to incorporate the concept of future design into these policy making. That's what I did at METI, Ministry of Economy, Trade and Industry. Okay, so let me share with you my presentation file. I hope you see the slides, all right? Okay. Can you see the slides? Okay.
Yes, we can see it. Okay.
Okay. Just a moment.
Okay,
Okay.
it's a bit. Okay,
Now you
great.
can see this one, right? Okay, so let me talk about the future design. So I'm going to talk about future design for about 15 minutes to 1 hour, and I'd like to accept any comments or any questions afterwards. Okay. So here is the content of my lecture today. Just a moment. So first of all, I'd like to talk about the sustainability. So the question is whether we are on the sustainable pathway or not. So I'll show you some of the figures and data, and obviously the answer is no. It seems like we are not on the sustainable pathway in many ways. So the question is why these, I would say, long-term problems with sustainability issues remain unsolved. There may be many reasons for that, but I'd like to point out intergenerational issues here. And then I would like to introduce you the future design concept. This is sustainability science, but we consider that the conventional ways of approach are not working well for these long-term problems. So obviously we need some new approach. So that's why we studied this future design research. I will talk about the concept and what the future design is all about. And I would like to explain a little bit about practices adapting this concept. Especially, I would like to introduce you a new kind of term called imaginary future generations. This is proven to be effective to change the mindset of the people toward more long-term issues. I explained in my lecture that we have a very short-sighted perspective, so we need to overcome this short-sightedness. But IFG, Imaginary Future Generation, seems to be working well to overcome this problem. So this IFG is incorporated into many practices in Japan. So I cannot explain everything, but today I will show you some of the examples carried out at the local governmental level or even in the industrial sector, followed by summary. Okay, this is my lecture contents. Okay. So let me start. Here you see some figures. Okay. So this is the excerpt from the paper written by Stefan et al. And you see here are some socioeconomic indicators, population, real GDP, primary energy use, and so on and so forth at the global level. Okay, this is a global level. But you see the figure starts from 1750. So it's just after the Industrial Revolution started. You remember that the Industrial Revolution was based on, the energy, especially fossil fuel, right? But after getting that, those energy, human beings expanded our human activities and economic activities. But most importantly, from these figures, you can see that, especially since the last century, the middle of last century, you see this dot line. This stands for the middle of last century, 1950. You see the big acceleration, right? So this is so the Stefan coined this phenomena as great acceleration, so-called great acceleration. So if you look back the history of the human activities, great acceleration happened, especially from since the middle of last century. This is the fact. So after Industrial Revolution, human activities started to expand, but especially since the last century, the expansion was accelerated. Okay, this seems to be good, but this is associated with environmental problems, obviously. So here you see some indicators of environmental systems, environmental indicators such as carbon dioxide, which is the main contributors to greenhouse gas, global warming, and methane, ocean acidification, and shrimp aquaculture, and nitrogen to coastal zone. Those activities having an impact on environment. And you see the same kind of like a phenomenon trend. Okay? You see the great acceleration that started in the middle of the last century. Okay, so that's very obvious because with the expansion of economic activities, we need energy, and we have been relying on fossil fuel. So as long as you use the fossil fuels, carbon dioxide it gets emitted. So these environmental problems are causing lots of sustainability issues, as you are pretty aware. Okay. Now, looking at the little more short time period, this is annual CO2 emission at the global level. This graph starts from the 1960, so middle of last century. So this figure is CO2 emission by fuel, coal, oil, gas, cement, and so on and so forth. And you see the upward trend. So the CO2 emission keep on increasing, turning point or the international treaty called the government in the world to cap the CO2 emission. And you also might know the Paris Agreement. Okay, so this is also a very important international treaty where the governments decided to cap the CO2 emission, especially setting the targets of global warming with the target of 1.5 degrees Celsius compared with the pre-industrial level. But we already experienced more than 1 degree Celsius increase. So it's kind of seems to be difficult to meet this target. But the important point here I'd like to highlight here is even though we have a lot of efforts such as international treaty, at the global level, CO2 emission keep on rising. Okay, here you see a little bit dip of CO2 emission. You know why this happens, right? This is around 2020, so it is attributed to COVID-19. You remember the stringent lockdown in many countries, so economic activities was kind of limited. So with that stringent lockdown, we see some dip, but to what extent CO2 emission was reduced? It's only about 7 or 8% compared with previous year. Even though we have that strong lockdown at the global level, only 7-8% drop down was achieved. Maybe CO2 emissions started to increase, because the COVID is now a little bit released. So, at the global level, the international government and also all the governments trying to achieve so-called net zero society, carbon neutral society, right? By 2050. But I assume that it's really a highly ambitious target, given the fact that this trend is still upward trend. So it seems like we are not coping with these long-term global issues quite well. Why? That's the fundamental question. We are not realizing sustainability in a good manner. Here you see the very famous figure. Some of you might know the concept called planetary boundaries. This was proposed by some researchers, such as Rockstrom. Rockstrom is a famous environmentalist. This paper in Nature proposed a sort of kind of like a safe zone. Here you see the green areas, safe zone for several environmental domains: climate change, ocean acidifications, biodiversity loss, and nitrogen cycle, phosphorus cycles, and so on and so forth. So what the Rockstrom proposed was kind of a safe zone for these environmental domain, or in other words, it's a tipping point. Tipping point, if the situation gets exceed the tipping point, then it becomes irreversible. It cannot come back to the original position. So that kind of point was defined quantitatively. That was a very important point of this paper. They also estimated or evaluated whether tipping point was exceeded or not. And they concluded that for several domains, the situation is already exceeding the tipping point. For example, climate change, you see the red color, and biodiversity loss, the speed or rate of biodiversity loss is much over the tipping point. So this is not irreversible. It cannot come back to the original position anymore. And also nitrogen cycle is also much above the tipping point. So that's what they concluded. So you see from this figure, situation is not sustainable because this is already over the kind of threshold, safe zone. So this is what the science provided as an insight into whether we are on a sustainable path or not. So obviously, according to these estimation studies, we are not on a sustainable pathway. Here is a little bit different indicator. It's a debt balance for several countries, including Japan. This is on the x-axis, y-axis. Y-axis is percentages to GDP ratio. If you see Japan, this is in terms of debt balance, Japan is the worst among these countries. You see that this debt balance is almost twice as the GDP. Okay, it's been increasing. There are actually many forecasts and predictions about which directions to go. And one research actually the researchers in the US were very curious about why Japanese, the debt balance is like this one. And the researchers calculated what kind of efforts are necessary to turn around the situation and get back to, for example, the situation like Germany, which is sound situation, in a sound situation in terms of debt situation. And then the conclusion was that now the tax ratio, consumption tax is 10% in Japan. But according to the study, they proposed to increase the tax to even like another 20%. So about 30% of tax, and continue to until 2,100 years. So another 80 years or so. And then comes to the situation like Germany. So it's very unrealistic. No, I don't think anybody accept this increase of the tax increase by 20%, further 20%, additional 20%. But the research, research is very interesting because this showed to what extent the situation is, the serious. Okay. What I would like to highlight here is that we have a lot of data, our predictions. For example, IPCC provided some scenarios about climate change situation. And in the worst case, by 2050, 2100, the increase of temperature rise is quite high, like 4 or 5 degrees Celsius. So we have data or predictions, right? However, we are not. Although we have this kind of like data or information provided by science, we human beings are not successfully dealing with these long-term issues because we saw the trend of CO2 emission at the global level, and for this debt balance, this is also the long-term issues, but situation is getting worse. And if you see the planetary boundary figure, in some domains, environmental domains, the tipping point is already exceeded. So we have lots of data, alarming data. However, situation is not turning around. Okay, it seems like we human beings are not successfully dealing with these long-term issues, or we are failing to transform our society. So the question is how we can design social systems or devices to cope with such problems. So that's the fundamental question. If you look into various data, there are many evidence that long-term issues are not successfully solved. Although we have some targets or goals, we human beings are not having a good pathway for transformation. So we have to understand why this is happening. So here comes the next section. I'd like to discuss with you why long-term problems persist, remain unsolved, right? So I'd like to argue from 2 perspectives, including human oddities and social systems. I'd like to cite, the paper written by Saijo, but the paper actually cited 2 important research by Robert Sapolsky, who is a professor at Stanford University, neuroscientist, and Tali Shallow. She's also the neuroscientist based in the UK. Now, according to Sapolsky, we have 3 distinctive human characteristics. Distinct human characteristics means we have specific features compared with, for example, animals. One of the important feature is sociality. We human beings have sociality. We are intensely social. Our fastest types of intelligence is the social skills. We are not so strong compared with, for example, lions or elephants and those things. But human beings are kind of at the top of the the pyramid, because according to Sapolsky, we have sociality. We have an ability to cooperate each other. We have we can cooperate to tackle with the problems. So that ability is very important. That's one of the characteristics. The second one is a contrast. Our brain is more interested in contrast than absolutes. So now I'm giving a lecture now, but if I suddenly shout, you might be reacting. So your brain is reacting to this change. Your brain is more interested in contrast than absolute. let me give you another example. For example, I like sweets, especially I like cake, right? So I tend to go to a shop to buy the cake. Last year I went to the shop to buy a cake, and it used to be 550 yen, Japanese yen. However, the specific cake where the price was 600 yen last year. So 50 yen increased. So I was surprised, and I was a bit hesitant whether to buy or not. But finally, I bought the cake because I like cake, so I cannot help eating it. But anyway, my brain was reacting at the time with this price change. Okay, so this is the example. We have a contrast. By the way, this contrast is in another word. It's a kind of like you can think this way. Your brain is tend to react to the change. But if the change stops, your reaction stops. So it's kind of like a optimized theory in a way. But we have another important characteristic, which is impulse, or you can say short-sightedness. So the dopamine rewards pathways in your brain light up on brain imaging tests when we go for the impulse immediate rewards. So if the cake is in front of me, I should eat immediately to increase our survivability. Okay. So this is also a very important human characteristic. We have impulse, short-sightedness, but this is very important in order to increase the survivability. And also, very interestingly, MRI and those brain imaging tests proves that your dopamine rewards pathways lights up. Okay, if you go for the impulsive immediate rewards, this is very interesting. So, in order to increase that survivability, we have sort of an impulse, also the contrast. Without the contrast, you can react to the enemies. If the enemy is in front of you, if you don't have ability to react, your survivability will be reduced. So those things are very important human characteristics. However, this is kind of like have a negative impact when it comes to dealing with long-term issues, because we tend to consider, or we tend to maximize the issue and maximize solutions, optimize the solution in a short-sighted manner. That's us. And also Saijo added one more thing, which is optimism. We have the optimism about the future. We are creatures who forget something awful in the past, pursue pleasure now, and consider the future optimistically in order to increase our survival probabilities. And there is a very interesting study carried out by Charlotte, and she actually invited the students, a lot of students in the room, and she provided cards, a lot of cards. On the back of the cards, there are many forecast, prediction written, okay? Many options, which might happen in 1 month away, in 1 month's time, okay? For example, we can eat something delicious in 1 month's time. We come across a traffic accident in 1 month's time. Your test score is very high in 1 month's time, and many predictions. And let the student choose what's going to happen. And the result was very interesting. The result was that the student or the participant tend to overestimate something good news, but underestimate something bad, like coming across a traffic accident kind of thing. So we tend to overestimate the good things, good information, okay, which is optimism. So we have optimism about the future. The Charlotte also point to the specific brain areas which deal with this, optimism of the human beings. That is called, I'm not familiar with this neuroscience, but the areas dealing with this optimism for the human being is called inferior frontalis. you have this inferior front gyrus on the both sides of your brain, okay? And this area is, operating so that people have some sort of optimism about the future. If you think negative things all the time, if you think, negative things happens in the future, and then you cannot survive. So this is also a very important, kind of ability or the characteristics of human beings. So these are kind of like a human being, the characteristics unique to human beings. But this is kind of negative in terms of the dealing with long-term issues. Because we have optimism, even though we are provided the information of the the bad trend of climate change issues, it's quite natural that even if we think in next generation, then our children will probably come up with something innovative to solve the environmental issues or climate change issues. It's quite natural we think that way because we have optimism. But the next generation might be thinking the same way, okay? Because our human characteristic doesn't change. So that way, even if the situation is getting worse, we cannot cope with these issues in a good manner. Okay, that's one of the reasons. Another aspect discussed by the study is social systems. For example, market. Market is an excellent device to realize short-run desire of people, right? We are taught that market is excellent to, the buyer and seller, negotiate and the price decide optimal areas. And but it's not a device to allocate resources with future generations in mind. It's quite obvious because future generation doesn't have money. Future generation, unborn future generation are not existing, so they cannot participate in the market negotiation. It's quite natural that the market is not functioning to allocate resources with future generation in mind. Okay, and democracy, it's another very important pillar of social systems. That's also a device to realize the benefit for currently living people, but it's not a device to include the future generations. It's quite obvious. Imagine that you are running for governmental election, running for presidential election, for example. And if you say, my policy is for the future generation, I'm really caring about the future generation, so especially the climate change issue. So I will ban the use of fossil fuel-based vehicles by half from tomorrow. I'm caring about the future generation, so please give me a vote. But your chance to be elected is quite slim, almost nothing, because the election is about realizing the needs of the currently living people. So that's one example. Okay, so you can understand that democracy is not a device to include future generations. So if you look at those existing social systems, they're not functioning for the future generations. So given those two factors, human oddities and social systems, so-called future failure might happen. Future failure means that future generation becomes a loser because the current living people tend to optimize solutions in a short-sighted manner, and we cannot care. Of course, we are caring about the future generation, but we cannot take into account the preference of the future generation into the present in an appropriate manner. Even if, especially for those with the trade-offs between generations, if there is a trade-off, such as climate change, it's a trade-off, right? If we have a good, enjoy our lives using fossil fuels, that's good for us, but it's a big burden for the future generations. It's example of intergenerational trade-offs. So basically, the sustainability issues and long-term issues contain the trade-off relationships among generations. That's making the situation very difficult. It's not, so given the human oddities and social systems, we cannot, deal with these long-term issues because we tend to look at the situation in a short-sighted manner. Okay, that's the fundamental problems we face. Okay, so we are not good at considering long-term issues. You can understand the reasons, right? So therefore, we studied up new research area or practice of future design. The researchers at Osaka University gathered to discuss how to incorporate the preferences of future generation to the present decision making. When it comes to sustainability issues, one of the key player is the future generations because sustainability issues is long-term issues. But with the current social systems, it seems like it's difficult to cope with. Therefore, we need to let the future generation into our decision making. But that's not possible, right? Because physically they are not existing. So what we should do for that? That's a fundamental question. So the point is, how can we design social systems that enables us to succeed a sustainable society to future generation? So the researchers from the various fields, economists and engineer and social scientists gathered at Osaka University to discuss what kind of social systems are necessary, what kind of social system we should design to incorporate the benefits of future generations. So that was in 2012 when we started up this discussion. And we wrote a kind of manifesto of the research in 2015 in Japanese. And this book is a translation of this first book. This English version was released in 2020. In this book, we wrote some like a manifesto of the research for future design. Okay. One of the keywords of this future design is futurability. I read the tentative definition of the futurability. Okay. According to the paper, the definition is an individual exhibits futurability when he or she experiences an increasing happiness as a result of deciding and acting to forego current benefit as long as it enriches future generations. It sounds a little bit, looks a little bit difficult to understand, but let's think about family relationships. That's obvious, right? Imagine that there is only one bread in the house, and the father gave the bread to the daughter. The daughter really gets happier because she can eat the bread. But because there is only one bread, the father cannot eat the bread. But the father feels happiness because the daughter enjoyed. Okay, that's understandable, right? Because it's a family relationships. But the future design is try to enrich this scope of relationship beyond the family relationship to the future generations, not without the family relationships. But if actually this sounds a little bit strange because in the market system, we are taught that we tend to maximize or optimize our benefit in a short run time. So the question is whether we have this kind of futurability characteristics. But according to the latest research, there are many proven evidence that we have futurability only if we have kind of a specific social system. So if we can design social system in a good manner, it seems like we can activate this futurability. This might help us to achieve the sustainability. That's our hypothesis. So the future design is a kind of practice of generating futurability by designing some social system, new social system? That's our fundamental research question. So what kind of social system can be designed? That's the research core, okay? So one of the promising approaches is called Imaginary Future Generation. Here comes Imaginary Future Generations. I will explain what it is. But this inspiration came from Iroquois tribes who have been living in the United States, the kind of tribes living near the five big lakes. Okay? By the way, Iroquois tribes formed a kind of like 5 or 6 tribe systems. Okay, this is considered to be the foundation of the federation system in the United States. That's an interesting story. And interestingly, the father of the country, the United States, for example, George Washington, attended the meeting of Iroquois tribes. That's a very interesting story. But the more interesting story is that the Iroquois, whenever they decide something important, they imagine themselves as members of 7th generation in the future. Okay, so Iroquois was making a decision as if they were the member of the 7th generation in the future. 7th generation is like 200 years time. If you count one generation as 30 years, for example, then multiplied by 7, it's 200 years. So they were imagining themselves as a member of 7th generation in the future. That's very, very interesting. A theory called theory of mind. Human being can understand other people's mind or pretend like somebody else. So we assumed when we get to know this story, we assumed the Iroquois was utilizing this ability, theory of mind. They try to try to become like future generations. In other words, they are putting themselves in the shoes of 7th generation in the future. So it's like this one. We try to think about the future like this one. This is called prospects. We have this ability. That's what we do usually. But what the Iroquois did was they put themselves in the shoes of the future generations, them assessing the present. That's what they seem to be doing. So imagine ourselves as members of future generations. This might enable us to create future ability, overcoming short-sightedness, or avoiding future failures. That's what we hypothesized. So we consider that we want to, develop this way of thinking and try to develop a new theory to utilize this kind of idea. That was a starting point of future design. Actually, IFG, Imaginary Future Generations, seems to be effective. Well, IFG can be considered as Ministry of Future, okay? In Japan, we don't have Ministry of Future, but if you create Ministry of Future, and then what's going to happen? That's something we wanted to know. And there are now many studies going on, experiments and field experiments and practices to demonstrate the effectiveness of this concept, IFG, Ministry of Future. And according to these studies, future ability can be activated and decision-making changes by adapting IFGs. According to the previous studies, we human beings are short-sighted. We have impulse. We have optimism about future. So we fail to cope with long-term issues. That was a conventional way of thinking. But if you incorporate IFG concept into the decision makings, maybe the decision makings change. That's the point. And field experiments, field experiment practices actually are changing they proving this concept. Okay. So let me explain just the first economic experiments adapting IFGs, okay? This was conducted by Kamijo et al., who is now the professor in Waseda University. And they did a very interesting economic experiment incorporating a concept of IFG. It's called Intergenerational Sustainability Dilemma Game. So they invited students, okay, many students in a room, and then asking the student form groups, and three persons form one group. This is one generation, okay? The one group is one generation. This group, that group can talk about 10 minutes, and they were supposed to make a decision between A or B, okay? If you go for A, $36 will be provided. Actual money is provided. This is an actual economic experiment. If you go for B, you are given $27. And then you can divide the rewards among the three as you want. That's the condition. So which option would you take if you are given this condition? I assume that most of people will say, I'll go for A, okay? But in this case, there's another condition, okay? When they choose A, okay? If the group choose A, and the amount of the money of the next groups, the next generation, on A and B will be reduced by 9. But if you go for B, no change in the next group. So it's like this one. So one group, generation, it means generation 1. We're given 2 options, A or B. If you go for A, you're given $36. If you go for B, $27. Obviously, A is better in terms of the amount of the money, okay? But if you go for A, the next group's option will be reduced by 9, okay? So the option A will be 27, option B will be 18. But if you go for B, the amount of the money in the next generation group will stay the same, 36 and 27, okay? This is the condition. So all the groups go for A, the resources will be reduced. It's kind of like unsustainable pathway. If you go for B, most of the groups go for B, and then the resources will be kept, okay? So kind of the sustainable options. But if you are very short-sighted, you might go for A, right? But if you think about the long-time future, maybe you can choose B. What's going to happen? By the way, the next generation can see previous decision, okay? It's like this one. The groups can see previous decision. So if the group members in generation 2 if they are given option A 27, B 18, they will know, oh, okay, the previous groups chose A. Okay. So that decision making will be seen by generation 2. Okay. So that's the simple condition. In this case, which if you are participating in this experiment, which one would you take? If I'm in the class, I will ask the student to raise a hand, but today I cannot do that. But I assume that still there are many people who going for A, right? Here comes the IFG. In another set of test experiments, IFG concept was incorporated, okay? Among the three, one person who is a subject future or minister of future was selected randomly. And that person, he or she is given the instructions as follows, okay? You are supposed to negotiate with the other 2 persons representing the later groups. So you should be the minister of future. You represent the future people and then negotiate with the other 2. But the monetary payoff that subject future receives is determined by the negotiation of the 3 subjects in the same groups. So the money doesn't come from the future. Okay, even if you're negotiating with others representing the future generation, the money doesn't come from the future generation. So that's the condition. So what's going to be happening if the IFG is incorporated. So majority voting system, if you follow the majority voting system, maybe only one person will be, cannot compete with other two. But you have 10 minutes to discuss what happened. Okay. So here is results. So without IFG, so if there is no such conditions, if you see this chain of experiments, generation 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, all the groups chose A, right? In chain at the second chain of experiment A, B. Okay. But if you go see the result with IFG, chain 6, generation 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, all the groups chose B, amazingly. 7 chains, 4 groups chose B. In total, 28% of groups chose B without IFG, 60% with IFG. So you might say that even without IFG, 28%, around 30% chose B. So there are some people who are have long-term perspectives. But interestingly, the group chose B only if all members are pro-social. Okay. Interesting thing is that the researcher did a questionnaire survey to all the individuals to judge whether the participants are pro-social or pro-self. Pro-social means that the people who care about the equity, the person who tend to care about equity. Pro-self is opposite. The person who try to maximize his or her benefits. Also, there are several types of people, but the researcher determined whether the participants, who is pro-social, who is pro-self. And interestingly, the group chose B only if all people are pro-social people without IFG. But you cannot expect in the society, real society, you cannot expect all the pro-social people, all the pro-social people, right? There might be some pro-self people, something. So this is the first experiment to show, demonstrating that IFG is working to some extent. Decision-making change with this kind of new systems, okay? So we can change the decision-making of the groups. So with this first experiment, we started to apply this in the real social problems, future design practices. I'll explain the first practice in Yahaba town, Iwate prefecture. It's a northern part of Japan. It's a small town with a population of 27,000 people. But this town is very famous because that's regularly holding participatory workshops on the policy of water management, okay? And we did a kind of social experiment with this town. You have a town, the citizens participate in this series of workshops. This is a snapshot of the people discussing about future plan for 2060. So these people are supposed to think about policies for the regional revitalizing plan for 2060, okay? But the conditions are different. If you see the left-hand side, these are people, so-called currently living people, current generation. This is normal mode of discussing the future, prospects. They are discussing about the future from the standpoint of current generation. On the right-hand side, you see the people wearing the happy suit coat. Happy means festival coat. They are the representatives of the future generation. They are given specific instructions to represent the future generation in 2060. But their discussion topic was the same. How to come up with the policies for revitalization in 2060. So we created 2 groups for current generation, 2 groups for IFG, but those 4 groups are discussed in the different rooms individually. So they didn't know each other, what other groups are talking about. But finally, in the last discussion, they formed a pair, current generation IFG form the pair and discuss the final plan. So it's a kind of intergenerational consensus building. Okay, so this was very interesting social experiment because their discussion was completely different. Here is the flow of discussion. We formed two groups for FG, two groups for current generation groups. We first did the past analysis one time. So we analyzed what happened in the past in the town. And we had a kind of like a workshop for designing future measures for the future, 3 times. And the groups prioritize 10 most important policies individually. From this point, up until this point, they discuss individually. Finally, they formed a pair and discussed, negotiated the policy issues. So intergenerational consensus building. And then they finally presented the Yahaba plans, okay? This was the kind of flow. IFG groups A and B were instructed as follows. You time travel to 2060s with the same age. You don't change the age, okay? Imagine that you time travel to 2060 and you are living in 2060 society. You are given the role to represent the people there and speak for their benefits, not for yourself, your families, and descendants. Of course, we did some exercises because it's a new situation for all the people. So we did some exercises. So we asked them to become an IFG and design the policies from the viewpoint of IFGs. And interestingly, current generation people consider present problems as future problems. It's a problem-solving type way of thinking. They care about the current problem, current challenges. And they have strong concerns for unmet present needs and problems. Of course, that's natural because we have a short-sightedness and impulse, okay? But future generations' way of thinking was very different. They try to prioritize complex and time-consuming issues. They tend to, prioritize those challenging issues. And they try to make use of local resources and strong point. They have a lot of strong points. They have cultures, environment, long history. They have a lot of strong points. So they try to optimize and make use of those strong points. That was a kind of way of thinking. And they propose a very integrated stories with holistic viewpoints. That was a very specific features to IFG. This is a snapshot of intergenerational consensus building because they presented very different ideas first. So they were kind of like, surprised at the beginning. But finally, they came to the final point. But interestingly, negotiation resulted in choosing more than half of measures originally proposed by IFGs. So the first current generation group was against the ideas of emerging future generation groups, but the emerging generation group explained the meaning. And then finally, the ideas of IFG was accepted. That was the first experiment. So it's a kind of like a new social practice happening in Japan. Okay, and in this particular practice, there's some evidence found. For example, the interview with the IFG after half a year, after the workshop was ended, but actually the workshop was six months long. But after finishing this workshop, the researcher interviewed those who experienced IFG. And then according to the interviews, it was found that viewpoint as current generation, viewpoint as IFG was not conflicting each other, but the IFG formed the higher viewpoint, okay? It's an overarching viewpoint. This way of thinking was kind of joy for the people. So many people say it was very interesting to think that way. They really enjoyed it. So this has to do with futurability ideas. This practice is featured in many international magazines newspapers. For example, Washington Post featured this future design practice in Yahaba town. And this is actually a link to my paper, but Washington Post released the news. And BBC also released the news this year. So this is a first practice. Okay. So I have many slides, but because time is running, I skip out the next practice. So let me show this one. Future design is now applied to many fields, policy, industry, and education. For example, in terms of policy, here you see the name of town, Kyoto City, apply this future design to think about policy for decarbonization, carbon neutral. And the government of Japan also applied this idea to labor environmental improvement, nurturing leaders. And the industry, they apply this idea to research and development strategy and business management. Unfortunately, I have no time to explain these many interesting practice, but the point is, just a moment. The point is, we can change our mindset and decision makings by adapting new social systems. In this case, imaginary future generations. If you design this kind of new social systems, then people's mindset or decision making change towards sustainability, overcoming short-sightedness. That's the point. So we are proving this kind of research, the evidence by doing the research and doing the practices in collaboration with industry and local governments or national governments. In terms of science, we are developing a new science relating to future design. This is very interdisciplinary because many experts, different experts are joining in this research area. For example, neuroscientists are very interested in why and how future ability is activated. And they are doing some research using MRI testing systems. Social scientists, psychologists are very interested in developing indicator systems to assess future ability. Engineers are very interested in developing the tools to effectively envision futures. And political scientists, political philosophers are thinking about rights and responsibility of IFGs in real decision making, and so on and so forth. So this is kind of a very interdisciplinary, and we are motivated to create new science to observe the present from the future perspectives. This is opposite. We try to observe the future from the present. That's the normal way. But what we are doing is different. Well, to observe the current decision making from future perspectives. This may change the conventional science in many ways. This is the concluding remarks. So long-term problems, sustainability problems may remain unsolved if we consider issues with the current social system as given. I explained the reasons, right? So we have to think about different ways. But IFG seems to be a promising social device in order to activate future ability. We are proving by experiments and field experiments and practices. This method can be applied to various social issues because it's domain-free. We are applying this one to environmental issues or urban planning or business management, or maybe the agricultural systems, which we might be interested in. So it's a kind of domain-free. So we are developing this new science with the many stakeholders. And I would like to, if you're interested in, of course, we can think about how this kind of concept can be applied to your research field. This is the end of my presentation. Unfortunately, I cannot explain everything today, but I hope you get some of my point. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Oh, wow. I was amazed. Thank you. This is so important for us. I'm very inspired, and I like the closing. Observe the present from the future perspective. And I think this is really a new science, as what you mentioned before. So, if possible, the center which I am from, the Center for Transdisciplinary and Sustainability Science, this is the kind of tools that we've been looking for. You know, we've been thinking about how is it that we can reach the heart and the mind, and we didn't know what the tool is. So looking or listening to your presentation, Professor Hara, thank you so much. And I know there are so many questions, so as a moderator I should not ask question. I will first give the opportunity here to Pak Syafiq Al-Masawa. He already raised his hand. So Pak Syafiq.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam.
Everybody here?
Yes, we can hear you well.
Thank you, Miss Dami. You my lecture before. Prof. Hara, you heard my voice?
Yeah, I can hear your voice.
Yeah, I'm from PhD student in IPB University in study program Science of Regional of Rural Planning of Development. So I'm very interesting about your presentation. But first of all, before we talking about the emerging future generation, we have to talk about the historical of Indonesia, because you just presentation about in Japan perspective is so different, because the historical, Indonesian is under colonial of several country for a long time. So, and we also a development country, and also the education level or political problem in Indonesia. So, and I like to ask about the futurability of increasing in happiness. You can, it's different, level of happiness in Japan and in also in Indonesia. And
Right.
also the about your social system, and oddities, is so different, the oddities in Japan and Indonesia. So my question is, how you implication your theory in Indonesia? Thank you.
Well, thank you very much for pointing out very important issue. And we are very aware of this, the differences in contexts and cultures, and some other factors such as the socioeconomic situations. The researchers are doing experiments in different contexts in other countries as well. For example, I cannot explain today, but one of the field experiments conducted by our colleagues was done in, for example, Bangladesh, and in the city and local areas. And what they found was, urban areas and local areas, the effectiveness was different. And so what the researcher, considered was a different method, not only the IFG, but plus some new method. And then that worked, even in the competitive areas, Dhaka. And Dhaka and Bogor, I'm sorry, not Bogor. Dhaka and, I forgot the name of the local town, but there are two sites where the researcher did the experiments. And then the situation was different. But if you design the new social system, then you can expect some effectiveness even in the urban areas. So we are collecting those information data to have some insights. What kind of factors are affecting to increase the effectiveness? And of course, human attributes are also factors affecting the IFG effectiveness. For example, we are doing a lot of research to analyze the relationship between human attributes, which means, we have a different family structure, income level, or whether you are living in the urban area, rural areas, or income structures, and also whether you are pro-social or pro-self. We have many measurements, such as pro-social, a generativity level, or the scientific literacy level. So we have not many, but we're doing research to analyze whether these human attributes are impacting the effectiveness IFGs. We get some insights from the information. So it's still in the process of development, but we are gaining a lot of information. And I can say that human oddity, I explained the impulse and short-sightedness and contrast. That's a kind of general human characteristic. It's a characteristic unique to human beings compared to animals. So in general, we have this kind of attribute, but we have different pro-social level, pro-self level, generativity, income level. Those things are factors affecting the effect. So we need to delve into the aspect. Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you,
so
Professor.
much.
Thank you, Mr. Dami.
There's another question from Professor Anas. Should I read for you, or you may ask yourself, I think. Please do.
Yeah, thank you, Professor Ara. Just would like to know how we actually prepare the group of people to be a member of the future generation. Whether there will be we need to consider the age or education background, or can we compare between politician and academician? And politician as the current generation, and the academician is as the future generation.
Right. Thank you very much for the question. And this also comes to the previous discussion of whether the human attributes, age or the male or females, and different knowledge level, that's affect the effectiveness. But what we do now is inviting different type of people. Diversity matters. That's our understanding. So when we do the practice in local towns, we do an open invitation system. We invite anybody who are interested in discussion for the policy. So for example, Yahaba town, the case of Yahaba, the participant was almost, the female and male are almost balanced, and the age was from 20s to 80s. So we try to mix up different type of people. That works out because imagine a future generation, the foundation is the future people. It doesn't matter whether you are a professor, whether you are an engineer. It doesn't matter whether you are 60 or 20. What matters is you are the representative 2060. So that kind of release that kind of human attribute. So kind of like a mixture of the diversity works very well. So we don't intentionally invite specific type of people. That's, I think, important, because when you think about the actual decision making in Japan, in the real society, we cannot invite only the politician. We cannot invite only the expert. We try to. It's kind of like a social issues which we all the stakeholders should be interested in or involved in. Is that okay?
Okay, thank you. I have one question, and that relates to the seventh generation. I was just intrigued why 7, because here in Indonesia, the Java island where I'm from, there is also the saying about 7 generations. So it seems there is this special number of 7 generations. What is your background of using 7 in this case?
Well, I'm also interested in why 7, actually. When we got to know the 7th generation mindset of Iroquois tribes. And as you said, if we search for other cases, 7 seems to be like a commonly, many frequently used. Our understanding is that if you think about the 7th generation, it's too far away. But if you think about the, mother, father is the next generation, grandmother, father's 2nd generation, the next generation is kind of observable. But if you think about your children, 2nd generation, your children, 2nd generation, if you add up the both generation, it can be like a 7th generation. You are kind of like you can sense, but physically, okay, that's our understanding. If you think that way, 7 not that far. 6th generation is observable.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense.
But I'm very interested in the story of 7th generation Java.
Java.
Yeah, Can you explain a little bit about it?
Well, I actually here in Java, people always say that if you have to be careful in the way you live, because what you do now will affect the 7 generations down. And then if there's a curse, the curse will go 7 generations downwards. So that's why you just have to be careful, because you don't want your great grandchildren be affected by the bad things that you do. So usually there's that saying.
Okay.
But I don't know, Pak Anas, you're from Java also. Do you have another explanation about tujuh turunan, where it comes from? Because it's really interesting.
Yeah, I think this is a kind of myth here.
It is a myth, but it's interesting to see that the myth is the same also as in the Iroquois.
Iroquois.
Okay, Iroquois.
Mm.
Okay, so are there more questions, people? We still have about 5 minutes. If there are more questions, you can raise your hand. Okay, if not, actually, I have many questions. So allow me to ask this question. Okay, this type of research, I think, is very important if the people who are involved are those who are not selfish. Is that true? Do you think that this type of research can also be used to help people change their paradigm? Because I think that's what we need in life, to make people to think more about the future. But sometimes when you talk to them, they will say, oh, come on, we cannot even live now. Why should we think about the future? So what's your comment on that?
Yeah, that's the actually human nature, the impulse and optimism about the future. We care about the now, but are not caring about the future. That's natural, way of thinking. But if we incorporate these systems, imagine future generations, and first of all, the people tend to change their mindset, even though beforehand some people say, "Oh, the future is not as important as now." There are many people like that, but to some extent, depending on the person, of course, the degree changes. But to some extent, the people change their mindset. Another important point is that this also has to do with the neuroscience, but by activating future ability, by adopting IFGs, people tend to enjoy the discussion. Many people said after the discussion, it was interesting. I really enjoyed it because I could see the new things which I couldn't understand, I couldn't see before. By looking at present from the future, I got to see the new things. That's enjoyable. That kind of things happens. So neuroscientists are trying to analyze why this kind of things happens. So it's a good thing. It's not a burden to discuss from the future perspective. It's at the very beginning, it's a kind of a cognitive burden because this mode of thinking is new for them. But after somehow getting used to these ideas, people, rather than feeling a burden, they enjoy. That's one thing. Another thing is robustness. I said one researcher did an interview for those experienced IFG after 6 months after the workshop ended. But those who experienced IFG still clearly remember how they felt in the discussion. They even say that they apply this way of thinking in the daily lives, in shoppings or in schooling of the children. They say that they use this kind of ideas. That means that it's the robustness, of activation of a future ability. So this is another important aspect of neuroscience, why this is happening. So that it's, I think, rather than the burden, it's a kind of benefits. So that's why I say that, of course, there are some people who are not willing to join this kind of deliberation. But after the deliberation, I wouldn't say all, but most of people enjoy this kind of discussion afterwards. after feeding the cognitive load at the very beginning, but after they see the new things from the different angle, which you cannot experience before.
Okay. Yeah, as Ibu Eva, Dr. Eva here, she wrote her comment here that you have integrated your engineering background with behavioral economics and institutional analysis. Definitely a interdisciplinary work that you've done. Are you alone in this, or is this a team that in the Osaka University? So how mainstream is this futurability, or is it also in other countries?
Well, actually, that's quite new. We studied this discussion in 2012, so it's almost 10 years. But we actually did study the discussion from 2015, around 2015. There are many studies now that are going on. The researcher in Osaka University from Department of Economics or Engineering, there are many researchers gathered, but they are now spun out in different universities. So other universities are doing lots of research for future design. Now, the future design concept is being applied to in other countries as well. For example, we are doing research with other countries, university in other countries, like Germany, UK, and Asian countries. And, I said Washington Post and BBC's are the articles featuring the Yahaba future design practices as a new experiments. So they are getting attention. So it's kind of like starting from Japan, but I don't say that we are trying to close this discussion. We try to expand because I think it's one of the keys to transform the society. Because one of the key barriers is again the human way of thinking. Also, we can draw a map, draw a pathway, but we don't change our attitude. So
exactly.
It doesn't change our society. That's why climate change issue and those long-term issues still persistent. I mean that. So I'm not working alone. We have a big kind of the interdisciplinary team in Japan, in Osaka University. So here there is a research base for future design. It's called Hara. My name is on the top. Hara Research Base for Future, because I'm the chair of this research group. But it's not only for Osaka, but it's in many other universities as well.
Okay. Well, looking forward for collaborating Indonesia and Japan for this research. I'm sure Indonesia will benefit a lot, and you can also learn from the complexity of the Indonesian society. It's very exciting. Pak Anas, Ibu Eva, is there a closing remark that you want to share before I close this and thank Professor Hara? If there's from Pak Anas.
Yeah, I think I just would like to thanks to Professor Hara. We met actually in end of November last year, and I visited Hara Sensei lab and we discussed, and then it's quite interesting research. And so, as Professor Dami, also the head of the Center for Transdisciplinary Sustainability Science, so we do hope that there will be opportunity to having cooperation, Prof. Dami, with Prof. Hara's lab, because I think we share the challenge, how to create new knowledge, integrating the what we call it tacit knowledge, what actually been doing by the community, which is good, and we actually doing that based on what we think good for the next generation, I think, for the local people. So how to integrate their knowledge, tacit knowledge in this actually research. So again, thank you very much, Hara Sensei, for giving us a lecture today.
Thank you.
And also thank you to all the participants.
Yeah, I think there are many areas we can, share the knowledge, because most of the social issues, environmental issues, kind of like with a, trade-offs between domains, environmental economics, but also trade-offs among generations. So that kind of problems which we cannot solve now is the opportunity for future design. So that means that there, as long as we have social problems, we can apply future design. So yeah, so let's discuss. Continue. I'm looking forward to continuing to discuss. Thank you.
Thank you. I will definitely send you email, Professor Hara, because there are many opportunities that we can work, especially in the small islands, coastal islands in Eastern Indonesia. We have some projects there. So it's already noon. On behalf of IPB, I would like to thank Professor Hara for his very wonderful, inspiring presentation. Thank you from the bottom of our heart, and let's give a big applause to Professor Hara. And I think we should take picture. Ibu is okay. Yes, if everyone can open their camera, let's take a quick picture of us all. Ibu Puput, silahkan dihitung ya.
Okay, for the first slide. Okay, 1, 2, 3. And the second slide. Okay, 1, 2, 3. And the last slide. 1, 2, 3. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Professor Hara.
Thank you very much.
Until we meet again.
Very much.
And enjoy your lunch.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Prof.